I don't imagine that you will get an apology from people at the White House who tried to crush you, or even from Morning Joe, who did the same. You are a dignified, wonderful person, and you are not going to ask for that. I will ask for it on your behalf and let you answer this. Was there anything in your reporting for this new article that you didn't know back in June when you first reported? That was about 2 weeks before the debate between Trump and Biden, which revealed everything.
Yeah, there's a lot in this piece that came to light to us after that debate, after the initial story that came out, and after the debate. We have found that over the past few weeks and months, Democrats have become much more willing to come forward and talk about their experiences with the president and with this White House. And, you know, I'm quite grateful for that. That's helped us really understand, you know, more fully understand the situation that has been going on for the last 4 years.
Okay, so here's some criticism of your reporting from back then. Joe Scarborough said, "I have repeatedly stated on air that I am an avid reader and cheerleader for the Wall Street Journal. That is what makes this false, biased story so disappointing. It is undermined immediately by the massive weight on the record." And then you had Ben LeBold, he's the White House comms director, say, "Yep, complete and utter editorial fail by the Wall Street Journal. Makes you wonder who they're taking orders from." This is from the same people who want, you know, a return to norms and for democracy not to die in darkness. Was there anybody that you felt was not truthful to you back in June that was talking to you now?
Look, I think that the White House knew exactly what they were doing in June. Their pushback to our story was, orchestrated out of, from a playbook from a crisis comms sort of operation. Yeah. And that's the mode they were in. One person sort of described them to me as, an inside person described this to me as, they operate as antibodies. And then this person sort of backed off when they realized that would make me the virus. But look, the Wall Street Journal was not at all cowed by this behavior. We expected it. We were still disappointed by it, I will say, even though we expected it. But our job is to tell the truth, and we're writing and reporting about the most powerful institution in the world.
Do you think there's more investigation to come? Because Kamala Harris did an interview with Bret Baier where she said Joe Biden's fine, everything's fine. It clearly wasn't fine. If you have to script your conversations from the president with his Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Treasury, the two most important issues on the plate for the president and for the voters, should there be more of an investigation into what they were concealing?
We're continuing to report on this story. We think it's incredibly important. And my sense is that others are too. This is the story of this White House. Every presidency has a legacy, and this is a major part of this president's legacy. And I am certain, I know that I have some of my colleagues from other news organizations I know are out there working the same.
We have about 30 days left for President Biden to be the president. Is he up to it?
He certainly is not as sharp as he was when he was vice president. His aides are, emphatic that his decision-making capacity remains strong. But I think we ought to see his doctor's reports. We ought to be able to interview his doctor. That's something that we're very eager to do. We ought to have the full information from his physicals. I think the questions about his health are clearly very relevant. And I think the White House ought to be more straightforward about that.
Yes, remember cheap fakes when we were told over and over that things that appeared to show President Biden had lost a step were somehow manipulated media? Well, they were not. And now we have some new insight into how Biden aides covered for him. And they just have to make it through one more month of this.
You prepare to leave the White House. Any other regrets that you have? Anything you wish you would have done differently?
Well, I guess if I thought a lot about it, it'd be something I would have specifically done, but not generically.
The Wall Street Journal's headline is this: how the White House functioned with a diminished Biden in charge. And diminished dates back to the first year in office. Quote, if the president was having an off day, meetings could be scrapped altogether. On one such occasion in the spring of 2021, a national security official explained to another aide why a meeting needed to be rescheduled. He has good days and bad days, and today was a bad day, so we're going to address this tomorrow, the former aide recalled the official saying. In the small windows we did see President Biden, there were falls on stairs, on stage, on a bike, but we were continually assured everything was okay.
Right after the debate, you insisted that President Biden is extraordinarily strong. Given where we are now, do you have any regrets about what you told the American people?
No, not at all. Not at all.
I talk to President Biden, regularly, usually several times in a week. His mental acuity is great. It's fine. It's as good as it's been over the years.
Well, do you think the president should undergo some sort of cognitive testing?
No, to the extent that we're having this conversation, I don't see any need to do that as it relates to Biden.
Last year, when I asked the press secretary about a book claiming the president himself felt like staff was treating him like a baby, I was told it was a ridiculous claim. This year, when I asked who is actually running the country, I was assured President Biden is. And when I read part of the Robert Hur report to the president himself about how they think, the DOJ, that he's a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, the president said that his memory was so bad he let me speak, which was funny. So there was just enough of those Joe Biden of years past moments for Dems to stand by their man for a whole term.
Good morning, Dana. The silence from President Biden is especially stark as the government barrels towards a shutdown. Still no comments from the president about this issue. It's the press secretary that is filling the void. Karine Jean-Pierre saying on Thursday Republicans are doing the bidding of their billionaire benefactors at the expense of hardworking Americans. She goes on to say that President Biden supports the bipartisan agreement that House Speaker Mike Johnson initially hammered out with Democrats to keep the government open. NBC reports the White House reportedly has been coordinating strategy with Democratic leadership in Congress, but White House officials believe that this is ultimately a problem for President-elect Trump and Republicans to solve after he encouraged them to sink the initial deal. As the president keeps a low profile, the Wall Street Journal reports President Biden's decline had been apparent even in the early months of his presidency. He would reportedly become tired if meetings ran long. His interactions with cabinet members were infrequent and tightly scripted. The White House, though, pushing back on these characterizations as the president insists he'll stay involved.
Got to keep fighting. Got to make clear we're not going away. We're not going away. I'm not going away. I'm going to be deeply involved in the environmental movement, deeply involved in foreign policy, deeply involved in all the things I've been involved in before. There's a whole lot of people, too, that are doing that.
The Biden administration is reportedly making plans in case there is a shutdown. The Office of Management and Budget has been in touch with federal agencies to see what they intend to do.
And, guys, there's really two angles to cover on this. There's the whole quiet quitting allegations, but then there's also this story out of the Wall Street Journal that came out recently. Quote, throughout his presidency, a small group of aides stuck close to Biden to assist him, especially when traveling or speaking to the public. To adapt the White House around the needs of a diminished leader, they told visitors to keep meetings focused. If the president was having an off day, meetings could be scrapped altogether. In spring 2021, a national security official explained to another aide why a meeting needed to be rescheduled. He has good days and bad days, and today was a bad day, so we're going to address this tomorrow, the former aide recalled to the official saying. Mark, to read this story, to look at the president from 4 years ago, there was a pretty substantial change, no?
So first of all, Annie Linsky deserves a Pulitzer Prize because she's reported this now with Democratic sources, but she reported this earlier in the year when everyone was telling us Biden was fine. And she did the reporting and dug it up, and Democrats wouldn't talk to her. And so the media jumped on her and attacked her and said that she hadn't properly vetted and reported her story. And then she went, and then all of a sudden Biden had the debate disaster, and all of a sudden they were eating crow. This is a political scandal for sure because the Biden administration lied to the American people about the cognitive capabilities of the president of the United States. But it is also a media scandal because we shouldn't be surprised the Democrats lied. They're partisan actors. The media's job is to report the truth, no matter who it benefits, even if it benefits Donald Trump.
And Molly, even if we weren't talking about the oldest president that we've ever had, this does come across as a very insular White House where in this reporting, he's really only talking to a pretty small group of aides, no?
Sure. Yes and no, I would say. It does seem like a small group of people there. But we had full knowledge that Joe Biden was old when he was elected. A lot of the country thought he was too old to be the president. So this news about what the Wall Street Journal is reporting here, it's not really about Biden's age. It's really about all those people that were around him that helped cover this up. And that's partly his wife and people close to him, but it's also so many people in the media. I think back at all these things, how they attacked reporters who would report honestly, how some reporters would provide their questions in advance so that Biden would know how to answer. And then when some of that got found out, they kind of denied that it was a big deal by not asking tough questions of Karine Jean-Pierre, by all of these things, by attacking Robert Hur when he said that there were problems. Yeah. And so this scandal of what the media were willing to do, and the only time they let up was when they thought he might not win the presidency, and so they went 100%. They went after it only then, and then they dropped it again, even though he's still the president.
Yeah. Juan, quickly, your thoughts.
Well, I mean, to me, the thing that drove so much of this was the fact that he said he was the one guy who could beat Donald Trump. And for a lot of Democrats, that was all that mattered. Now, he was functional. The question is, especially now after the election, I think we've seen a precipitous change in Joe Biden. And I think people wonder what's going on. Even though he took a trip to Africa and even went down to the Amazon, it's like people are watching. Is he going to fall? Is he going to trip? And is he steady?
Yeah.
I think there's been a change. But all of this talk, I covered so many presidents. I remember presidents who had bad days and who had questions from reporters, including my own, before the press conference. So I take a lot of that as with salt.
Now, reporters who really spoke very little about this throughout the course of the Biden administration are suddenly now pouring out with quotes and coverage over what they're calling the diminished president in charge. This is from the Wall Street Journal. In the spring of 2021, that is right after the president took office, a national security official explained to another aide why a meeting needed to be rescheduled. Quote, he has good days and bad days. Today was a bad day, so we are going to address this issue tomorrow, the former aide recalled the official saying. When you see all of this coming out, Senator, do you reflect on it in terms of the ramifications for the country and your own responsibility to the country? You said this in February of 2024. Watch.
This is a man who is sharp, who is on top of his game.
Your thoughts as you look at all of this reporting and things from your own colleagues as well coming out.
Well, Martha, I support President Biden's record as someone who has gotten past year after year significant and consequential legislation. And you dismissed with a wave of the hand my point just a few moments ago about our getting out of here and everyone doing their work. Let's take a look at where we are and why. Weeks of negotiations where the White House played an important role, and Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate hammered out a path forward for us to get out of here on time, was thrown into chaos by a 4 a.m. tweet by Elon Musk, supported by President-elect Trump, which has produced chaos in the House of Representatives. President Biden, with 36 years of experience here in the Senate and 8 as vice president, had a steady hand in negotiations around an historic bipartisan infrastructure bill, bringing back
Senator,
manufacturing,
if I may,
growing our economy
strongly. You want to bring it to what's going on right now, and that's fine. He has not been involved in this process. We heard that essentially at the White House earlier today. I understand that you think
Martha,
it was derailed by I understand that you think it was derailed by Republicans, and that's fine. But the fact is, he was asked today, is the president involved? And he may have his reasons for wanting to stay back from this and let Republicans hash it out. But the fact is, he has not been front and center on any of this.
Martha, the way you're framing it, I think misrepresents the president's role. We had a deal, Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate. Elon Musk and President-elect Trump broke it, and now they're going to have to help the House Republicans fix it. President Biden coming out and doing a press conference now or engaging in a Twitter war with the president-elect
and they do have to
isn't
fix
necessarily his role.
I mean, forgive me if I don't, it's always a cliffhanger, and we watch it happen every time, and it always ends up getting worked out. And so my assumption is that it's going to happen again. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'm wrong. But I do want to get back to,
I'll remind you, Martha, that in 2018, 2019, We had a 34-day shutdown.
Yes, we did. Everyone survived it. Yep.
And it cost $11 billion in wasted
the money that
and
gets
didn't
spent
solve
by
the
the
problem.
government, we've seen the tremendous amount of debt that this government is in through spending. And when you look back at that shutdown, since you brought it up, what happens is everyone gets paid back. Barely anything actually ended up shutting down during that period. So, I mean, this idea that, the country is going to fall apart if it shuts down for a little while, I just think history has proven that it doesn't actually happen. But we'll see what happens this time, and we're going to cover it very closely and fairly. But I want to ask you one more time. When you reflect on your own role in reporting how you saw President Biden and his ability to govern, knowing that the security of this country is the highest responsibility, way over any friendship or personal ties, do you have any regrets about not saying to others, look, is he fit to serve now? And is he fit to serve for another 4 years, Senator?
Look, Martha, the first time I saw an incident where President Biden seemed to me to not be on top of his game was his debate with President-elect Trump. That, for me, was a challenging moment. And it produced a several-week process where I started asking my colleagues and folks at the White House about whether they had seen anything similar.
Okay.
I do not hang out with the president on the weekends. I don't spend time with him socializing and in person. My experience with him in the time up to that debate led me to believe that he was fully capable of competently leading our nation, both from a security perspective and legislatively.
Okay.
And I'll remind you, when he became president, he inherited 3 different crises. 3,000 Americans were dying every day from the pandemic. Our economy was in free fall, and in the global stage and domestically, our economy, our public health situation, our relations with our allies, I think we're in terrible condition.
Well, this is scary. This reminds me of what we knew about Woodrow Wilson, but only in retrospect. Here was a guy who suffered a major stroke and was unable to perform the functions of the office of the presidency, and his wife dictated what the public knew and what went on inside the White House. And we have here a picture. This is a scary, very disturbing picture of people who knew that Joe Biden was not up to the job of being president and who systematically hid that from the American people and then lied about it to the American people. The list of people who inside the White House proclaimed him to be absolutely at the top of his game, we should remember all those people because they were lying to us. And the idea that he was going to run for re-election, I have a theory about all this, which is that Joe Biden was surrounded by people who were not strong, effective aides, but former Senate aides, people who'd been with him for a long time. Not like a governor where you have people who walk in and say, you're not looking so pretty today, Mr. Governor or Madam Governor, but people who are like Senate aides whose job it is that the senator makes the decisions. In combination with members of the committees that they're on and members of the Democratic caucus, your job as a Senate staffer is to help sell it back to the people back home and also then to help organize the life of the day of the senator. They're not people whose object is to say, Mr. President, with all due respect, you're not up to this job. They were listening to Jill Biden and to Valerie Biden Owens, his sister, who plays a big role in all of his political decisions, who said, Joe is going to run again, now make it happen, instead of saying, Mr. President, you're not up to this. Instead, they facilitated what we now know was a charade.
Well, and that's one of the most shocking things, because the people closest to him knew where he was with his ability to function now. I mean, we're told he has good days, he has bad days. Sometimes we change things, we cancel things, we move them around. But for somebody who's going to be the commander in chief, every day has to be a pretty good day. And for them to get him through this term is one thing. But as you mentioned, those around him who were saying he's vibrant, we can barely keep up with him, he's going to run for another 4 years. What's your message to them, and then the messaging they were giving to the rest of us?
Shame on you. Shame on you. You owed it to the country, you owed it to him, and you owed it to your party. People like David Axelrod and James Carville, who were raising questions about his fitness to run for office a year and a half before the election, Joe Biden literally had his people leak to one of the major newspapers an ugly comment about David Axelrod because David Axelrod had raised questions about his fitness. But these people were being selfish, starting with the president and his wife and his sister and his close-in aides. They were involved in something that would have been bad for the country and bad for the Democratic Party and bad for the office of the presidency and bad for our country in a dangerous time where great challenges await us at here and abroad. And he was not up to it. And we now know it. And the scary thing is that one of my favorite quotes out of the article is somebody said, well, every time he went into the Situation Room, he was at the top of his game. No, he wasn't. He might have had a better moment in the Situation Room than moments the day previous or the day after. But the idea that this man was capable of serving as president of the United States in this dangerous time is ridiculous. And the idea that he would be able to run for, and if we were elected to serve for another 4 years, is, as we now know, just a complete, utter lie. And these people facilitated that fiction for months and months and months to the detriment of their party and, more importantly, to the detriment of our country.
President Biden has been missing in action. New York Congressman Mike Lawler calling him out.
By the way, Joe Biden's still the president of the United States. Where is Joe Biden? Has anybody heard from Joe Biden? I mean, it's kind of bizarre that the sitting president of the United States has done nothing as we're barreling towards a shutdown.
Even some Democrats think Biden has already checked out.
My last question, do you think Biden has quietly quit?
No, absolutely not.
We'll see. If he don't do nothing over the next 30 days, I'm gonna say he quit.
The purpose of Trump's appearance at Mar-a-Lago Monday morning was to announce a $100 billion investment from SoftBank. It was more or less a standard presidential policy announcement. The main difference being Trump isn't president yet. A fact that's getting easier and easier to forget as Joe Biden seems to be disappearing from the public stage as his term comes to an end.
Paul, however, should the American people be frightened? Because Biden, or by rule, still has the power. De facto, it's a bunch of faceless people wearing lanyards, potentially. But this is the most vulnerable time in a presidency where this is a message to the world of our weaknesses, in essence.
Well, it's not like anything's going on. What do we need to pray? You don't ever want to have a circumstance where the media is literally asking, where is the president? Does he know that he's still president? And by the way, there's these drones flying all over the place. And can we get a comment on that? And he's completely MIA. We've talked about this on this show. When the top guy is MIA, and you see this in transitions in cities, and I've been part of it, the individual departments, they'll run under their own power for a while, right? But after a while, they all start to realize, ooh, we're on our own. We can do what we want. So as a result, only 1% of the federal employees are coming to work. Lloyd Austin goes MIA for 2 weeks. Why did he go MIA? It's not because he wanted to or he's trying to hide or anything like that. In fact, he was a real military man and came out and fell on his sword for that. He did it because he got used to the fact that nobody was looking for him. And now it comes out that that's valid. His emails weren't getting answered. Nobody's calling him back. They don't seem to care. So you know what? I'm going to go off and have this operation. That's what's been going on. And I love the fact that the Democrats are couching this now as a strategy. This is Joe Biden's strategy. It's all very mysterious, the man behind the curtain. This is the strategy that got him booted off the ticket. So if that's the strategy, we're in real trouble, or at least the Dems are.
Tommy, the left-wing ghouls, though, are still pushing that agenda, although their reign is in its death throes. Today, almost $4.3 billion in additional student loan forgiveness. Right. That brings it to $180 billion in a student loan bailout that people who don't have student loan debt are shouldering for nearly 5 million borrowers. This is after SCOTUS shot it down. That's just today.
Yeah, who are the social justice warriors who are running this country? Because nobody voted for them. We don't know who they are. You're giving them a lot of credit, just people in lanyards. I think it's like recent college grads who have some sort of an activist role, and they're the ones running our country. Also say it's rich. There are a lot of people that are really angry of the clout in the poll that Elon Musk has right now, and maybe some of that is rightfully so, right? They're upset that Elon Musk appears to be the second president next to Donald Trump. Joe Biden's completely out of the picture. But those same people did not care for the last last 4 years that Joe Biden is not really regularly meeting with his cabinet. He's not seemingly in charge. He's having to have scripted conversations with his friends that are supposedly serving alongside him. Where was your outrage? You're mad at Elon Musk. You haven't been mad at the man who's been supposedly running our country for the last 4 years. Here's another thing that bothers me. Yes, it feels like Trump is already president, but he's not. Who is the one that's okaying and signing all these pardons and commutations for all these folks? Is it Joe Biden who has the sudden shift of forgiveness for these folks? Or is something being put in front of him and he's signing off on it? He can still do a lot of damage as the leader of the free world in the next few weeks. That's really concerning to me.
Oh, there's more wretchedness to come in terms of pardons. And the last name will start with a B.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we're seeing that, and we're seeing student loan forgiveness. But I'm kind of laughing at all these Democrats who are saying, or even Republicans who are saying, where's Joe Biden? Because they should have been asking that question for the last 4 years. We have seen now in reporting from the Wall Street Journal that this man needed help, that he needed organized naps even, that he needed organized meetings. And we saw this, right, with our own eyes. We knew that. And Kamala Harris is an empty vessel. So if she comes back, really, honestly, what are they going to accomplish? They've accomplished so little during their administration that to come back now, particularly with the massive amount of distrust surrounding both of them. Kamala Harris didn't hide the fact that Biden was not all there. She lied about it. And everyone in that orbit lied about it. So it's not so much him not showing up. It's he's never did show up.
And it's what we don't know. One thing that we didn't mention is the 2,000 troops that are in Syria that we just found out about.
That's the thing. This is our current commander-in-chief. And I don't forget that for 1 second. And Lord knows, neither do the families of all of those soldiers who are deployed, all of the ones who operate in the shadows day in and day out. There are plenty of men and women under that person's watch right now, and it is absolutely frightening. I agree with you that the most frightening part is that there's a molecule of opacity that we don't know about. The thing with President-elect Trump and his entire cabinet and all of the counselors and advisors, we know who they are. We know what they're saying. We know they are because they publish it every day, all day, right? Every day, all day, we get to see what they're uncovering in real time. We get to see policy advisements. We get to see ideas. We get to see all the things. That's how a government should work. The entire current administration was hallmarked that we never knew what was going on. Those 50 sources that came out in that Wall Street Journal, absolutely explosive expose, frankly, some of them were named in terms of who was filling in for the big guy, but many weren't. You're absolutely right. He didn't read the facts. If he did about those commutations, if he did, he would know, for example, that the non-violent felonies, some of which were associated with murders. I mean, all it takes is reading the second half of the charges to know that insurance fraud one, to know that it was actually connected to, for example, a triple homicide. And yet that, all they are doing, these guys are flocking toward, they're like cannibalizing a cow with piranhas, like the Far Side cartoon, where they're flocking to the body and he's signing whatever's put in front of him. And again, that's our current commander-in-chief. Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.